All right, welcome back. You know, today's the day we've been referencing for a while, right? The Supreme Court's going to hear oral arguments on President Trump's tariffs as to whether or not he has the power to levy them. Well, make no mistake about it. This will be a pivotal decision, and it is by no means a foregone conclusion. What I can say is this, though. If he fails at the Supreme Court level, the markets will not like it, but he will eventually prevail using other means. And if he does prevail outright, well, it's just going to be business as usual. Now, I'm no expert in these matters. I'm not a lawyer. So I've drafted in an expert to walk us through some possible scenarios and what to expect from each one. The president deems this decision one of life and death. And to him, it's a national security threat. So let's get an expert's point of view. Please welcome into the show, Mr. Roger McEowen. Roger, thanks for taking the time. I know you're out and about on the speaking tour. Have you been listening? Have you been hearing? What's been the chatter? Where do we stand here today with these oral arguments?
Yeah, I've been trying to follow the transcript while in and out of breaks during tax seminar today. And thanks for having me on, Scott. Really appreciate that. I think where we're at right now, I'll kind of cut to the chase and explain why. I think the administration clearly has, based on the questioning, and it's always somewhat of an uncertain thing here, but based on the questioning that I've heard so far, the Trump administration has Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh solidly on their side. Now, there's three solidly on the opposite side. They're not going to change it. That doesn't matter. So it's going to come down to Barrett and Roberts. So that's where a lot of these cases come out at, and that's where it's going to come down to on this one. And it's a simple question. This is not a constitutional question. The question is whether the IEEPA, when it says regulate importation, does that mean reciprocal tariffs? Again, the power to tax is the Congress. But this statute says that the administration, the executive branch, can regulate importation. So a tariff is a regulation of commerce if it's imposed clearly for regulatory purposes, but it's a tax if it's imposed primarily to raise revenue. These are not revenue-raising taxes. These are reciprocal tariffs designed to get other concessions from other countries. It's regulation of the economy. And for over 200 years, it's been understood that the power to regulate foreign importation includes a tariff power. And so the ordinary reading of the statutory phrase that they are discussing today in terms of regulate importation includes traditional and well-known tariff power. And there's an abundance of evidence, Scott, that the phrase regulate foreign commerce includes the tariff authority. And of course, foreign commerce is conducted through importation. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, and you know, you're a lot smarter than I am, and I like to try to make it as simple as possible for myself. Mm-hmm. And I just don't understand with the laws or the rules the way they are. I mean, are they trying to tell us, me, them, all of us, that if some other country wants to tax or tariff our goods going into them, we can't do the same to their goods coming to us? I mean, we just have to take it?
Well, if the president doesn't have this power, in other words, if the Supreme Court upholds the lower court, then what they're saying here is you can have tariffs on this country, but it has to come through Congress. Now, you and I both know that Congress acts very slowly. It's a deliberative body, and they're fractured, and they can't respond. And that's why over 6 times since 1930, the Congress has delegated more tariff authority to the executive branch to react against foreign type adversarial movements. And so when the president declares a national emergency, an emergency condition, the president has to have the authority to act. And that's what they're doing in these types of situations. And Justice Thomas's question this morning, he doesn't say much usually at oral argument, but his first question today picked up on my point. And he said, to quote him, he said, if regulate does not include tariffs, then what other policy levers are also out of bounds? So he's clearly got the same concern that you've got, that we can't tip the balance the other way and say, this belongs to the Congress, particularly when you're dealing with emergency situations and economic situations. And Justice Alito gave a very interesting scenario. He said if a statute gave the National Park Service the power to regulate access to particularly crowded parks, he said to the government, to the challengers' attorneys, he said, are you saying that wouldn't allow the National Park Service to impose an admission fee? And of course, he's saying that the emission fee in that instance would be fine. So he's making an analogy here to the tariff situation, saying that would be fine for the executive to do that. It's under that broad authority.
So I mean, they're expecting that the president to kick it back into the cesspool, which is Congress, right? And all of a sudden, you turn tariffs into a political. It turns it into a political punching bag rather than just an economic or a revenue punching bag. That's what it feels like to me, and that's nowhere near where it should be going.
It puts us at a strategic economic disadvantage if all tariffs have to come through Congress.
Exactly.
If we're saying all tariffs are a tax that is a revenue generator that has to come through the taxing authority of the Congress, that's inappropriate in this situation because they can be used to regulate economic activity. That is in the domain of the executive branch, and the executive branch, as the head of all federal agencies, also fits in that theory. And we've got evidence. If we had time, Scott, I could take you all the way back into 1792 and just take you through the various tariffs that the executive has imposed for over 200 years. And so you and I both know that if they uphold the lower court, the markets are not going to like this. This is an economic decision. Courts are not well attuned for this. This is why economic decisions are not to be made by the courts. They are to be made either by the Congress or by the executive branch. And here, based on the statutory language, this belongs with the president.
Yeah, I agree, but we'll see what they do. So you say we've got 3 for, and 3 against right now, and we're waiting on who?
I think it's three on each. Yeah, the way I'm reading it, we've got 3 on each side, and then it comes down to Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Barrett. They're going to be the deciders.
I don't like the way that feels because Roberts went with Obamacare way back when, if you remember correctly. So we'll see what he does this time around. Maybe he's got a chance to redeem himself. But then quickly, now that you've said it like that, which way do you think it ends up going? What do you think? What's the early line?
Boy, I think there's a chance, Scott, that we could get a plurality opinion. In other words, no solid majority opinion, and they end up fractured, and we have a plurality put together, cobbled together of 5 somehow. How that comes out, I don't know. But I think it's clearly 3-3, and it's going to depend on where Roberts and Barrett come out on this.
And didn't you just say that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's binding? You said that, I think, the last time we talked, right? Or they can just take the opinion and, So explain that real quick before we go.
Yeah, the Supreme Court does not issue advisory opinions, but this case does not involve a constitutional question. This is a statutory interpretation. So it's not as substantive, and that's not really the right word, as an opinion that's on the Constitution, involving a constitutional issue. So the thinking is there that the administration could say, well, okay, thanks for that interpretation. We've got our own interpretation of it. The other thing to keep in mind here is that the Senate did take some action on tariffs within the past few days. I think that sends a message to the Supreme Court that says, hey, you stay out of it. We've got this. This is not an issue for you to deal with. Let the president go ahead and do this. If we don't like it, then we can pare that power back. And that's the way the system is supposed to work. And then the other thing, real quick, Scott, is even if they rule against the administration, there are numerous other tariffs that will still stay in place. They are not going to be affected by this opinion.
Right. Awesome stuff. There's nobody else covering this like we are, and nobody else has you to cover it like we do. So I really appreciate it, Roger. Roger McEowen coming to us all the way from Hays, Kansas. Thank you very much for taking the time. We'll see you again soon, Roger. Really appreciate it. All right.